Hello and welcome to our first partnership discussion on DeFi. I'm Jake from Kinetic, and today I'm thrilled to have with us Alex Szul, co-founder of Rome Blockchain Labs. This is the team developing the infrastructure of the Kinetic lending market that is soon to be coming to the Flare network. Welcome, Alex. Glad to have you.
Thank you, Jake. I'm very excited to be here, and I'm also very much looking forward to the Kinetic launch in the coming months.
Me too. I get a lot of questions, such as white paper when and news when. It's a very lively discussion at this point. Could you please share a little bit about your background in government policy and DeFi lending?
Absolutely. So I'm one of the three co-founders of Rome Blockchain Labs, and we call it RBL for short. We've been in the DeFi space since 2020 now, and we've focused on kind of two main areas of blockchain technology. The first one is on infrastructure, and then the second one is on application layer technology. On the infrastructure side, it's mostly data analytics and things of that nature, which we'll talk about perhaps in a later call or something else. But today we're here to talk about the application layer technology, which is primarily lending markets. We're most well known for launching a protocol on Avalanche called Benqi. We support that protocol and the liquid staking there. We helped launch a protocol on Polkadot called Moonwell, which has recently moved over to Base. And now we're helping to launch the Kinetic platform here in Flare. So as far as my own personal experience, most of the work I do at Rome Blockchain Lab centers around business strategy. I work with and I help advise and organize our own companies and our partner companies in developing a robust business strategy around how they're going to expand their protocol or their blockchain network. And one aspect of that actually brought me into Washington, D.C., where I meet with staffers, representatives, senators, to actually explain blockchain technology as a technologist is the term that's used, and it really helped them get a grasp on just what it is that we're all building in this space and kind of how it connects into the financial area and other aspects of the economy.
Do those conversations tend to happen quickly and efficiently?
You know, it's really interesting. There's a surprising amount of knowledge about blockchain on the Hill that I did not expect. When I went in there, I'm like, okay, I assumed I would have to explain this is a Bitcoin and this is a blockchain, but no, people are asking me like, so tell me about decentralized exchanges and tell me about this and about that. I'm like, oh, okay, this is nice. And what's enjoyable about it, yeah, exactly, is that even for some of the members who are north of 60 or 70 years old, and it'll kind of turns from a technology conversation into a conversation about current events, asking me about, I was in the Capitol building the day that the Financial Services Committee met about the SBF FTX fraud. And actually one of the members left that to come meet with me right afterwards. We brought his son and we were having a nice round table drinking a Coke, talking about crypto fraud and what RBL is doing and building to help remove those things via decentralized finance.
That's reassuring. As somebody who is waiting for regulation, waiting for clarity, wanting regulation and clarity, because whatever negative effect, I think the long-term positives of being able to work within the markets and the laws as they exist are definitely something that I'm excited about. So that's very reassuring that you're not having to be like, okay, so Bitcoin's it's like a Pokemon card of money. You don't have to dumb things down for them. That's great. So what initially attracted you to the world of DeFi? How does your interest in policy influence your approach in this field?
Good question. So I was initially drawn to DeFi, or I guess I should say what ignited my passion about decentralized finance was actually the opportunity that DeFi provides to people all around the world. I'm not sure if Jake, if you travel a lot, but if you've been to third world countries before or even developing nations, you'll see that the capacity for earning a dignified living is astronomically lower than a lot of first world countries or developed nations. Not to say that opportunity doesn't exist, but the access to it is drastically limited. But what at the same time you'll see is that smartphones and cellular technology is pretty broad reaching. They're comparatively inexpensive to purchase, and you can buy plans that are more accessible. So what I realize is that because you can access decentralized finance systems via your phone, and they're basically free to use, you pay a couple cents to access them or to spend money on the gas, that people can actually use these protocols as a form of quasi investment's the wrong word, but quasi money making as a way of just earning a living. And that's what really sparked my passion for it. And then what added fuel to the fire was when I saw how many scams are in the space and how many people are fraudulent or anonymous and taking advantage of individuals who don't have much money in the first place. That made me want to be even more open and aggressive with what we build from there. So as far as it intersects with my influence or my opinion about policy for decentralized finance regulation, I was speaking with a staffer probably about a year, 2 years ago, and I asked him. I said, so, and his representative was playing a pretty significant role in the creation of policy. I said, so how long do we have to wait until there's meaningful clarity around decentralized finance? He says, well, if you want any meaningful bills passed to regulate just cryptocurrency, you're going to wait probably 3 to 4 years. And that was about 2 years ago. So we're kind of on track on that. He says, if you want anything about DeFi, it's going to be about 5 years until you get something there. I said, in 5 years, the DeFi we know today isn't going to be DeFi in the future. It'll be radically different. So I'm primarily interested in accelerating people's understanding about decentralized finance and also fixing some of the core problems like consumer protection is kind of a big one. And also setting a new standard for what DeFi should be, in our opinion, at Rome Blockchain Labs, which is something that is reliable. We all understand that the technology in and of itself is, as long as it's audited and built correctly, is immutable. But there's still a human factor that comes in some instances. And those are the things that we're trying to set a good standard for.
I mean, it makes perfect sense. Part of what attracted me to crypto in general is just the massive amount of opportunity that exists. And part of that, I think, and this isn't just financial, this is creative, this is community opportunity. And part of the reason I think is we don't have as many structures in place to keep certain people out, to block things off. I mean, you can look at the stuff going on with the unions. You can look at Hollywood. I talk about this sometimes as someone who has a creative background. It was a breath of fresh air to enter this type of community because you can really just come in, make some content that people enjoy, and you'll get an immediate response. It's definitely one of the most equalizing of communities I've ever been in.
It is, yeah.
So, what are your overall impressions of the Flare network? In the context of the current DeFi landscape, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so my overall thoughts on flaring in the context of the current DeFi landscape are it was when I first found out about the Flare network and began to look into the tech stacks, I was actually genuinely surprised because what I've seen is that your team is developing solutions at an infrastructure or a network layer that have historically been relied upon by external second parties or third parties to develop. And I think that's something that is a significant differentiator, and we can get into more details during the length of our conversation. But one of the things that is, I think, a prevailing narrative in the DeFi space, especially among builders, is that there has to come a point where the user or the institution doesn't necessarily know which network they're on or doesn't necessarily know what application that they're using. It's more important about the output, right? It's I don't use one certain bank because I like their colors because their founder is really cool. I use a bank because they're safe, secure, transparent, whatever it is that it might be. Or it could be the same thing for I guess art, you kind of do like it because you like the artist or the picture, but I think you get the point. Our computer, it can be that way. My point is,
sure. The end goal of being invisible.
Exactly, is to not really know what's going on under the hood, not for opacity's sake, but just for ease of use. And the things that Flare is built into the infrastructure layer are solving that, right? You have the Flare connector or the Stake connector, excuse me. You have the time series oracle. You have I'm blanking.
That big delicious cake, yes.
Layer cake, thank you. Layer cake on being able to actually to transmute or transport assets, and you also have the F assets as well. So there's a lot going on inside of Flare that solves these problems from the outset, and I think that's one of the key differentiators. So,
well, let's talk a little bit more about that delicious multi-layer cake. Can you explain the importance of layer cake in the context of cross-chain interoperability?
Sure. So one of the fundamental risk vectors in any decentralized finance ecosystem are bridging and then also oracles. Actually, oracles are massive exploit areas, or have massive exploit potential for DeFi primitives. In the context of Kinetic, you have the pricing for the markets are dependent upon oracles, and I will get to the layer cake as well. I'm just kind of providing some contrast here. Is
Sure.
that within the oracle space, if you can manipulate the pricing of an oracle, you can cascade or trigger liquidations. You can artificially over collateralize on a market and allow people to borrow money that they shouldn't be able to pull out. There's a lot of bad stuff that can go on, right? And that's pretty significant. The other side is the actual assets themselves when they come across into the ecosystem via bridges. And you have two main problems. You have one problem is under collateralization, and then the other problem is centralization risks. So on the centralization risks, if you have one person or one group who's holding the keys and is responsible for enacting something, right? You have malicious actors who can just perhaps misuse the keys to walk away with money, even though they shouldn't. Or you have the opposite, where people who are supposed to perform actions don't, and they're the only ones who have the keys. So if I need to push an upgrade, or if I need to free something and I can't do that, it can be a bit of a challenge. So it seems like at a very high level, from what we've seen at Rome Blockchain Labs, Layer Cake is solving these problems with requiring over collateralization on, or at the bare minimum equal collateralization on all bridged assets. There's a huge problem taken away there, because now you know that everything is backed one-to-one whenever it goes across. In terms of the centralization, having bandwidth providers be required to, having bandwidth providers be the actors which are facilitating the transfer in and of itself, and having that collateralization requirement built in solves that problem. Now you're not relying upon somebody else to go through and move the assets for you. You have guaranteed liquidity.
Right. I mean, yeah, it's a huge advantage to have this kind of stuff built in and not have to rely on outside people. Biggest reason is they understand how things work. There's not going to be as many slip-ups adapting, getting someone else in. And of course, these other teams are professional, but it's just that little extra bonus. Let's talk a little.
Absolutely.
Let's talk a little bit about F assets. So these are also going to be a very crucial part of the growing Flare ecosystem. How do you think F assets are going to impact the broader DeFi market?
So I think F assets have a significant opportunity for reshaping the way that DeFi markets presently operate. And this is due to the resolution of the fragmentation that exists within the cryptocurrency space overall. So not DeFi, but cryptocurrency. One of the biggest, I guess you can call it a challenge or realities of the blockchain space is that because of the accelerated nature of innovation, there's been a lot of value that's been left behind in older technology that hasn't yet transported to more innovative systems. And Bitcoin is a perfect example of that, right? Everybody and hopefully their mother knows about Bitcoin or in some sense is considering buying it. But if you look at the technological opportunity, that's built on top of Bitcoin versus something that's like in Flare or another emerging blockchain networks, it's like a horse-drawn carriage versus a Ferrari. Confirmation time. I mean, you and I both know. I think most listeners will also know the technological differences there. So even though there's still significant technological advancement, value capture is mostly weighted towards Bitcoin and Ethereum and some stable coins as well. So how do you move things like that or XRP or Doge or any other asset over to places where that value can be utilized? And that's where really F assets come in. Being able to port that value directly over and have it be backed in a short on chain that the proper custodian has that asset, as validated on Flare is absolutely game changing, because you're kind of decentralizing decentralized finance in a way. I mean, it's something that I'm glad to see happen, and I am very excited to see how this helps promote the growth of DeFi and Flare in the long term.
Yeah, I'm sick of us all having to follow Grandpa Bitcoin around.
Tell me about it.
Come on, Grandpa, get out of here.
It's funny, I have a lot of, I'm sure as you do, a lot of friends and family ask you about, should I buy Bitcoin? Should I do this? And I tell them, I'm listening. I own a blockchain company. I've been in this space for years. I've never bought Bitcoin. And they're like, why wouldn't you buy Bitcoin? I'm like, not because it's necessarily wrong or bad to do that, But when you understand what's coming, what's on the bleeding edge of technology, you kind of know in the next couple of years, assuming things develop, that there's a lot more opportunity on this side of the fence.
Assuming some more rationality comes in, which
Yeah,
we'll see.
We'll see.
We touched on it a little bit, but let's talk a little bit more about FTSO. It's a very unique component of the Flare network. We talked a little bit about its benefits. Can you go into a little more detail on its significance in ensuring decentralized and accurate data feeds? We talked about why that's important a bit as far as keeping liquidations fair. But can you tell us any more?
Sure. So Oracle services are one of those things that unless you're actively developing in the space or you're very, very interested in the underlying technology for DeFi, a lot of people probably don't think all that much about. But in reality, they really drive a significant amount of trends in the markets. And for people who might be unfamiliar with Oracles, the way it works is that you have a tech layer that will gather off-chain data sources. It could be weather, it could be stock prices, it could be cryptocurrency prices on centralized exchanges, and then it pulls that information or anything else, and it pulls that information through their systems across various sources, averages it out typically, and then provides that solution on-chain. That way you can have a digital on-chain representation of some off-chain process. It's like giving eyes from the blockchain into the internet or into the real world. And the role this has is massive, especially when you look at the functioning of core DeFi primitives. They leverage oracles every few minutes to ensure that asset prices are always accurate. And for the majority of blockchain of smart contract enables blockchain networks in the world, there's a third-party oracle provider that will launch into the space. Chainlink's the most famous one. You have Pyth, you have Super Oracles, Redstone. There's a lot of companies that will deploy this Oracle solution, and they'll incentivize data providers to provide an accurate measurement on that chain. With the FTSO that Flare is supporting, have that system built in at the base layer, and you have an incentive mechanism that actually weights the output based upon the stake or the capital that somebody puts up to secure that vote in the aggregation of pricing. So you have an economically incentivized data feed that's distributed across, n number of users built into the foundational infrastructure layer of a blockchain ecosystem. I don't know if that's ever been done before to this degree and integrated with so many other meaningful innovations in blockchain technology. So having that from the outset is going to be, I think, a huge differentiating factor.
Right. You would think that it would dramatically influence the reliability, the efficiency of DeFi on the Flare network. There's still a lot of growth to see on the Flare network. So I think as we move forward, those benefits are going to become more and more apparent.
And when it comes to considering building on Flare, one of the things you have to look at is actually your operating expenses, and Oracle pricing is one of those key operating expenses, and they can be pricey depending upon how much you got to pay and what you have to or what the cadence you have to query at. But for Flare, it's very, very minimal. I'm not going to say nothing because almost everything has a cost due to Sybil resistance on blockchains. But overall, there's a huge weight taken off of developers for not having to constantly spend hundreds or thousands of dollars to get data in all the time. So the impact it has on efficiency and security is, I think, pre-stated in a sense, but it is very good to point out. Yeah.
So from your dual perspective of regulation and DeFi, how do you see the Flare network itself influencing the intersection of these two worlds as we move forward?
That is a good question, Jake. So let me think about that for a second. One of the core problems and challenges that the traditional financial sector is going to face in terms of addressing on-chain finance, and I'm speaking from a traditional financial perspective. That's where most of my experience is in. So when it comes to like art and things like that, I couldn't really be as accurate with my response. But when it comes to the traditional financial sector, there's a couple challenges that they have that I don't think people either know about, or I don't think that people are really discussing. And one of them is how do you securely validate on-chain assets. So RWAs are kind of a new trend that's coming out, or I shouldn't say new trend, but they're a popular trend now that's coming out. In addition to that, you also have to look at the omni-chain future, where you have dozens of chains interacting all together, and those requirements, in addition to others, necessitate technology that will be able to deliver a comprehensive, transparent, and secure solution for the mirroring or transmission of value onto a blockchain network, into just the blockchain ecosystem as a space. And Flare's technology is really helping lead that position. Banks, for example, right? I think everybody knows that they're mostly built in COBOL and really old languages that nobody uses anymore. And if you get paid a lot to do. But there's such a drastic chasm between where banks are at right now and where on-chain finance is moving that they're not going to be able to catch up. The necessity of having to transferring all of that decades of very heavily regulated technology onto a permissionless network is going to be difficult to do. But finding somebody who can securely, transparently, and efficiently transport the value onto a blockchain network will help solve some of the problems that they have. So the capacity for interweaving these two areas is greatly simplified with the state connector that Flare has across blockchain networks, and also with the FTSO that is developed for off-chain to on-chain value transfer. And so you have the outside in and inside out. That challenge is definitely resolved. And then for actually promulgating the transference of these assets on-chain via the layer cake, that's also simplified with a one-to-one collateralization and no governance and no centralized approach that Flare is taking. So there's a lot of groundwork that's been laid already that's going to help blend these two systems very, very smoothly.
Well, continuing to look towards the future, where do you see the Flare network in the next 5 years within the DeFi ecosystem?
That is a good question. If I knew the answer, it'd be an island somewhere. But
right, we love predictions in this space.
Let's see. So all right, so 5 years from now, that would put us in 2029. So the present market cycle is probably picking up. So that gives us another 18 months, maybe 24 months, assuming everything lines up for a good peak. So that'll put us into 2026. So we're probably going to be at the start of the next, if I had to imagine, probably the next bull market from there. We can probably expect a lot. We hope, fingers crossed, have a lot more clarity around regulation on decentralized ecosystems, specifically DeFi. So we should have a warming up market that has had 2 more cycles to mature with proper regulation. When you combine those external contexts with the technological innovation that Flare is developing, you have a very, very promising future here, because you can now take the things that need to be moved on chain for efficiency's sake, or for transparency's sake, or for really any other value driver, and you have a fully developed platform that can help drive and accept those systems. I think one of the biggest opportunities that Flare has in the 5 years is really cracking that problem around value transference for Bitcoin and XRP and other assets. Being a blockchain that can solve that problem is going to put Flare head and shoulders above many other networks.
Well, I'm sure a lot of our listeners love hearing that.
I'm glad. That's one of the reasons that we are building on Flare.
Right. There's a massive amount of potential, and it's going to be really exciting. We're so early still, and it's we're finally going to be getting to a point where we can see some of these things, some of these dreams that we've all been having come into reality. So are there any other closing thoughts or insights you'd like to share?
See, closing thoughts and insights. So if I were to leave the Flare community with kind of one suggestion or one insight, I take myself back to when I first got started in DeFi and blockchain technology in 2020. And one of the things I'm so glad that I did was I took a little initiative and I began building grassroots engagement and organizing my friends and peers in the space where I was working in to kind of develop and create an almost business level focus on expanding the teams that I was supporting, those communities and teams that I was working with, right? I wasn't, I don't want to call it, I wasn't a anonymous degen who just said when token, where dev, that kind of thing. I instead said, okay, what are the serious strategic opportunities that exist for XYZ protocol within this ecosystem or within the broader space? And I partnered and worked with the team to help drive those things. And speaking as somebody who's built protocols, numerous of them, the team actually does see that. We see every message in the Telegram group, and even if it doesn't look like it, and we take a lot of those suggestions quite sincerely. So if you have the passion for Flare that we do, and if you see the long-term potential that exists here, go and interact with the founders and the developers behind some of these leading protocols. Talk with them, make suggestions, provide constructive information. And what you're going to find is a better opportunity to be involved in this team than you could have ever imagined.
Yeah, the ability to reach people in the crypto space on Flare, anywhere, it's crazy. Any other type of industry, it's very difficult to get a hold of someone that's leadership behind a project. But you can just pop into a Discord, pop into a Telegram, and if you're not just spamming, you can talk to like the people behind it, or at least get a firm connection with them. And it's something that I love. Well, thank you very much for your time, Alex. I thought that this was going to be a good conversation, and I'm happy to report it was.
That's awesome, Jake. Thank you. Thank you. I've loved the questions you've asked, and they're very, very poignant, and it's given, I hope the community an opportunity to see the value and potential in Flare beyond just the technology, but really bring in a broader perspective into this space.
Leverage the people, baby.
Absolutely.